We're finally here at my favorite point in time in cinema history. With the First World War behind us, a new creative movement in cinema was on the rise: German Expressionism. German Expressionism was an artistic movement in the early 20th century that emphasized the artist's inner emotions rather than attempting to replicate reality. With that, we get distorted images and hyper-expressive performances, high contrast between light and shadows. In today's video, we'll look at the films that best fit the genre of Gothic horror in this decade. So now it's time for the 1920s to show us their best Gothic horror films. We open with German filmmaker Robert Wien's psychological tale of terror that drips with shadow. At a carnival in Germany, Francis and his friend Alan encounter the crazed Dr. Caligari. The men see Caligari showing off his somnambulist, Cesar, who the doctor claims can see into the future. Shockingly, Cesar then predicts Alan's death, and by morning, this chilling prophecy has come true, starting a domino effect for even more murders. What makes this film an essential viewing, you may ask? The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is the poster child for the German Expressionistic movement. If you've watched our last video covering the 1910s in Gothic horror, you can see the similarities that Eerie Tales has with Caligari and how the film plays with light and shadow. This is the appeal to Caligari. The set is not just lit with light and shadow, but it's painted on as well. The world in which the characters resides is twisted and distorted. If you pay close attention, you don't see a single straight line in this film. Homes look squished, roads are jagged, and everything feels like it's about to collapse inward. These set designs aren't just an expression of how the filmmakers of those times were feeling, but it also ties together in the narrative. Let's talk about Conrad Veidt for a moment. In all, we're going to be seeing more of him in this video later. But in the last video, I never really got a chance to talk about his acting in the silent era. Most movie aficionados know him as Major Strausser in Casablanca. But for the silent movie fans, he was the expressive monster and victim in the late 1910s and throughout the entirety of the 20s. We don't watch The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari for the crazed doctor or for its twist ending, but we watch it for Veidt's performance alone. With very little runtime in this picture, Veidt plays a terrifying boogeyman with no consciousness. That is, until we realize the story is all in the head of the film's lead, Francis. Only then do we see Cesar for who he truly is. Not a somnambulist, just a quiet man living in his own world too, in the asylum alongside the rest of the cast. That is the power of Conrad Veidt's talent as an actor. This next entry on our list avoided its own destruction after a battle in court with Florence Stoker over copyright infringement. In this loose adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the vampire, Count Orlok, expresses interest in a new residence and the real estate agent Thomas Hutter's wife. Why is this essential? Nosferatu is not only essential viewing for Gothic horror in cinema, but I would say a key pillar in cinema history overall. The film's influence is seen all over the history of horror cinema and an early blueprint for how horror films are to be made in the next decade. I feel like this film has been covered to death over and over again from documentaries, both on YouTube and horror documentaries to begin with. So how can I incentivize you to watch this film, let alone a silent picture, which is why we're here? So let's settle on one thing from this film that I can tell you why you should view it. Max Schreck's take on the vampire in this film differs from the Stoker tale. While yes, this is an adaptation of Dracula, Nosferatu follows the plot of the novel loosely. Max Schreck doesn't play Dracula. No, this is a new monster. One that doesn't get the invading foreigner trope that has been overplayed. We are getting a being that embodies the plague. While we associate vampires with bats and wolves and mist, Orlok uses rats as his signature calling card for his presence. Also too, while we're at it, let's focus on another character from this film, Ellen Hutter, who gives herself to the Count in hopes to save her town. The rats who have nearly eradicated Ellen's home dissipate with their insidious master's death. The character of Ellen Hutter is an icon in this genre and needs her respect too, because while women in Gothic horror literature have been battling monsters and saving the day, in cinema it was another thing. Nosferatu was one of the early examples that women aren't relying on the male lead to save them. They can either save themselves or sacrifice themselves to save those they love. We take a break from German cinema to look at an American masterpiece in the eponymous Man with a Thousand Faces. Aspiring young opera singer Christine discovers that she has a mysterious admirer, intent on helping her become a lead performer. This enigmatic masked presence is a horribly disfigured recluse who lives underneath the Paris Opera House, known simply as the Phantom. When the Phantom takes Christine prisoner and demands her devotion and affection, her suitor sets out to rescue her. So why is this essential? So while this isn't a German expressionistic film, The Phantom of the Opera still holds a footnote in Gothic horror cinema. It carries its own iconography of American horror in its adaptation from French journalist and author Gaston Leroux. America's answer to Germany's Conrad Veidt lies in Lon Chaney. The Man with a Thousand Faces helped made the role of Eric the Red an icon in horror cinema. When Chaney enters the scene, he commands more than just his cast's attention, but demands the audience's as well. The magic of the Phantom of the Opera was Chaney. He was the Phantom and the draw at the theaters. When Mary Philbin's Christine tears off the Phantom's mask, revealing this hideous face behind it, Chaney again works his magic in his performance, and we get a moment etched in history. We return to Germany for F.W. Murnau's final film. At the tail end of the German expressionistic movement of the director's works, Murnau created a stunning world based on the older traditional telling of the legend of Faust. In this classic of silent cinema, the demon Mephisto makes a bet with the archangel that a good man's soul can be corrupted. Mephisto sets his sights on the thoughtful old alchemist Faust, who is desperately trying to save his village from the plague. He is able to help the villagers, thanks to Mephisto, but further dealings with the devil lead Faust on a decadent downward spiral. Can he redeem his soul before it's too late? Why is this essential? The imagery in Faust is a gothic fantasy nightmare. From the opening scene when Mephisto places his bet against one of the archangels in heaven that he can corrupt the soul of Faust. The film is blanketed with in-camera shots and special effects that leave you amazed. Practical effects, even in the early years of cinema, holding up amazingly. Faust was received poorly at the box office and by German critics at the time for its handling of the source material. Nonetheless, the film lives on as one of the greatest films ever made. It later inspired the Night on Bald Mountain segment from Walt Disney's 1940s animated film Fantasia. Now, I don't know about you, but if Disney was inspired by your works and immortalized you with such an amazing segment, amazing piece of music and art, I think you won despite what the critics had to say. Before we get to our final film, here are the runner-ups on our list. Our final film on this list inspired one of the Cape Crusaders' iconic villains' looks. Care to guess who that is? Disfigured by a king as a child, an 18th century clown again becomes the pawn of royalty and the star of a freak show of a traveling carnival. Why is this essential? The Man Who Laughs was produced by Carl Laemmle, mostly known for The Hunchback of Notre Dame and Phantom of the Opera, and later on Dracula and Frankenstein with his son Carl Laemmle Jr. Directing was given to Paul Leni, who was a key figure in the German Expressionistic movement with films like Waxworks in Germany and The Cat and the Canary in America. To tie these two filmmakers together are the film's lead, Conrad Veidt and Mary Philbin. Veidt had worked with Leni on Waxworks, and Philbin worked with Laemmle on The Phantom of the Opera. Lastly, Jack Pierce became the head makeup artist at Universal in 1926, and was responsible for crafting Gwynplaine's appearance. Carl Laemmle's Gothic film superproduction is stacked with a great combination of German and American talents, if you can't tell. The Man Who Laughs becomes the blueprint for how Universal Studios horror films in the 1930s are to be made. In one part, it's a horror film, but that term hasn't been coined yet. It's also a melodrama with elements of the swashbuckling genre. But nonetheless, the visuals and storytelling has something of the structure of the Gothic involved. To open up a decade as a mute killer and close it with winning the people's side and getting the girl, Veidt's Gwynplaine is one of the few positive notes in Gothic storytelling where the hero comes out on top in the end. What did you think of our picks? Did your favorites make the list? If not, drop down in the comments below your best Gothic horror films of the 1920s. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to see more of our videos. Hey, while you're at it, join our YouTube membership and be a film student and get our videos early. Thank you for watching.